Hello everyone. Moving forward from the theories of foreign direct investment, we will look at the increase in outsourcing of research and development activities by multinational corporations. We will try and understand the motivations behind such activities. Moreover, what are the demand and supply related factors which in fact support and facilitate this kind of an outsourcing. In fact, if you look at the literature, till 1960s and 70s, it was highlighted that there was more tendency towards centralization when it comes to research and development activities, which is also something we will talk about later in terms of concentration of innovation. Later, in 1980s, we find that there was an outsourcing of such activities internationally. A study by European Commission in 2005 showed that 9 out of 10 companies, they were outsourcing 15% of their R&D. Two-thirds to the other companies, one-third to the public research organization, and one very important point that was highlighted of this kind of an outsourcing of research and development activity was that this outsourced work was indeed a kind of a complementary activity which was contributing to the in-house R&D being conducted at the parent organization. So it was not being seen as something which was substituting the research and development at the parent organization. So you find that even in terms of internationalization of research and development, there are certain sectors. There is a concentration of research and development in few sectors. So on one hand, we are talking about internationalization of research and development, where we are talking about coming up of the newer players in the entire process of research which is being undertaken by multinational enterprises. At the same time, we realize and identify that such kind of an activities are rather concentrated in few sectors. For example, IT, automotive, pharmaceutical, biotechnology are the areas where this is concentrated. This kind of a phenomenon is rather concentrated. Most sectors will further find that it is such activities are further concentrated in few regions. For instance, pharmaceutical and biotechnology in Europe, US and Switzerland, automotive in Japan and Europe, IT in US, Taiwan and Korea. So on one hand, we have geographical spread of such activities, whereas within that spread also once again, there is a concentration of those activities in few places. A recent paper highlights that entire literature on internationalization of research and development. I would suggest that you should look at this paper, particularly if you are interested in conducting research in this particular area. And they have identified time trends with respect to the literature that has been conducted in this with this major research question of research and development activities of multinational enterprises. They have also focused on the methodologies which are being used by these papers. For instance, whether they are using R&D level information or they are or the research is incorporating patent level data. So firstly, this paper has highlighted that during the 1970s, most of the literature were actually looking for, and they were arguing that this kind of an R&D internationalization was indeed an outcome of the strategic diversity which the multinational enterprises are now trying to attain. At that time, the prominent thought process was that multinational enterprises are indeed looking for market and or efficiency in their production. Like we talked about globalization of consumption and globalization of production. So one aspect of predominance of market means that the companies are indeed looking for newer markets for their existing product, or they are looking for efficiently producing the existing product, like we talked about in the product life cycle model, where once a product has been matured, now the question is to reduce the cost of production so that the firms can compete with others in terms of the reduction of prices. So during 70s, that was the focus. However, 80s and 90s, the literature which emerges during this particular time period has identified that the research activities are indeed very different, and there are different taxonomies, the classifications which can be developed with respect to the specific activities being conducted, why they are being conducted, how they contribute to the parent organization research capabilities. These are some of an important focus of the literature here. Later, we find that the multinational organizations point of view, This could also be a part of an organizational restructuring itself, whereby instead of focusing on a single economy to place their entire international activities with respect to research and development, they may identify different pockets and engage them in their research activities. Apart from that, one very important focus of the literature during the 1980s and 90s was to find out how to conduct this cross-border R&D, because it will entail immense amount of coordination and cooperation among the different teams which are now working across the borders. Not only that, before a company can actually make a final decision with respect to how to conduct that, they have to finalize where to conduct it. What are the different new pockets which are emerging? Now think from a point of view of an American economy based multinational enterprises. Initially they may think about conducting this research and development in countries, maybe other European countries, like we saw in product life cycle activity where the production shifts, but here we are talking about the research activity. So they may identify certain pockets, let us say in Europe or in UK or in other Southeast Asian economies, where they find that there are major work being conducted in that particular area. Say for example, in case of a semiconductor, they may identify some places in Japan or in Taiwan, and so on and so forth. So the first decision is with respect to where to conduct it, which is the place where such kind of a research can happen. Once that is being decided, the next level question emerges: how to integrate those activities with respect to their parent organization activities. So a lot of literature once again focus on these very important points. Later in after 1990s and particularly during the first 2 decades of 21st century, we have found that a lot of literature look or revisit the questions of this R&D laboratories taxonomies. We will talk about them, like asset seeking and asset augmenting, and what they are trying to do now is basically use the availability of longitudinal data which is now available for the working of these multinational enterprises over a long period of a time, and trying to figure out these motives, essentially trying to find out the empirical evidence with respect to the different taxonomies which were talked about during the 80s and 90s. In fact, in that context, the use of patent data has also become extremely prominent. So now we will first talk about the different taxonomies, which will also give us an insight into the why these firms are now motivated to conduct research and development across their borders, and what are the factors which will support them, facilitate them. Moreover, what are the factors which will in fact affect their decision negatively as well. So let us first look at this taxonomy coming from Archibogi and Mikey, whereby he talks about 3 major reasons or 3 major ways through which this globalization of innovation can happen. First, where the companies, the multinationals, in fact are looking for international exploitation of something which is an outcome of the national research and development endeavors. So something they have come up with, a new product which is being developed in their domestic country's lab, and as a result now these companies want to explore, extend their market to the other countries. They are the major players which would be participating in this will be national and multinational firms. Multinational firms which are now seeking to reach out to the other economies, and national which would be and in fact supporting the multinational activities. Say for example, they might decide to go into a joint venture, etc. So here we have already discussed about it when we talk about the different modes through which a company can in fact externalize or internalize their production in the other economies, like exports, licensing, foreign direct investment, etc. So this kind of an exploitation of a nationally produced research and development can be either done through exporting. So you may need a domestic distribution company. So that is where the role of the national firms located in the host country will come into picture. Apart from that, licensing, they are also once again the national firms which will be taking the licensing agreement, which will be getting into a licensing agreement with the multinational enterprises. They will also may or may not take a part of the production in the host country and then release the product in the domestic market. Foreign production of domestically developed product and role of product life cycle theory. So all these aspects we have already covered. The another important concern here is a way through which what we are talking about is a global generation of the innovation. So now we are looking at a product which is an outcome of the innovation activity which has undertaken place internationally. The major players in this case would be multinational enterprises. They would be conducting R&D at a home. They might have an R&D in the host country also. So this host country R&D could be a part of their wholly owned subsidiary, or in collaboration with the domestic player, they are getting into some kind of a joint venture for research and development, or it can take a different forms. And apart that particular activity can be done either through acquisitions or through the greenfield investment. Say for example, now Microsoft decides to establish their lab in India, so they have one research lab which would be focusing on research in India. The focus could need not be only Indian. They might be developing global products, or they might be developing a product which will also get contributions from the other such R&D centers of the same company located in the different locations or in the different countries as such. So what we are talking about is a product which is not produced nationally, or which has not been innovated nationally in a location, but a product which is rather innovated across the countries. There is a possibility a part of it might be developed or worked upon in a team in a particular country, whereas another part might be worked upon by the team in the other country as such. The another taxonomy which has been talked about is the global techno-scientific collaborations. Here, the focus of the multinational enterprise is that they are looking for the scientific collaborations which is beyond their own country's boundaries. So they are no longer bounded by the science and technological developments which are available within their own home country. In fact, they can access the information which is available in international universities, have their operations in such countries, develop maybe some kind of a linkages with these universities or public funded research organization, get into some kind of a joint scientific project, scientific exchanges or joint venture for an innovative product. Here the focus would be to access to a techno-scientific works which is being conducted internationally, instead of being limited to what is being done in their home economy as such. Another very popular taxonomy which is being discussed, and it came during 90s and has in fact been a focus of lot of literature in this field, is related to home-based augmenting, home-based exploiting, vis-a-vis asset exploiting and asset seeking. Sometimes these terms are also used interchangeably and also juxtaposing. Like for example, home-based augmenting would be something like a asset seeking, and home-based exploiting may be something like an asset exploiting as such. So what do we mean by that? Let us look at that in detail. So asset exploiting R&D, as you would have guessed by now, and as the name suggests, include some amount of maybe an adoption of a product which is being produced or being innovated at a parent organization. It may in fact entail some kind of activity in the host economy also. But what we are merely looking at some kind of a duplication of the multinational enterprises home-based activities, and it is in fact based on a very traditional view of innovation activities. On the other hand, once we identify that the information sources, the knowledge sources for coming up with a newer product are now no longer limited to the home country of a multinational enterprises, then we enter and we talk about how the activities of the multinational enterprises in the other economy can indeed be asset augmenting. That means they are supporting, they are in fact contributing a complementary role to what is being done in the home economy. So this kind of an activity can be either to improve the existing asset, acquire or internalize or create completely new technological assets through the foreign located research and development facilities. Foreign location in that case provide an access to complementary location specific advantages. Say for instance, if a company wants to know the consumers which are of a particular country, clearly a certain kind of a survey needs to be done in that country by using some maybe other consultancy in that country, then accordingly adoption of the product is something which was a part of asset exploiting. Here we are talking about development of a product which may be very much augmenting or kind of a building the asset which they have at the home country. One very famous example in this case comes from the GE portable ECG machine, which initially was being developed in Indian context, but later it could actually be used in the other economies as well. Why this asset augmenting internationalization would rather happen? Here what we'll find that over a period of a time, there is indeed a lot of increase in the cost which is involved in technological development. Not only that, the products are also extremely modular and complex in nature. With the increase in the complexity of the technological development, it is very difficult that a single country it is very difficult that a single company will have indeed access to all sorts of information that may be required to develop that product. That means there is a need for technology sourcing. That also means there is a need to interact with the different and geographically dispersed actors who may indeed have an access or endowment of this particular complementary bits of knowledge. Moreover, what we have witnessed is essentially a very high pace of innovation activity in many industries. That means the companies will not be able to do everything on their own and will also be able to do it at a very fast pace. So how about identifying location specific capabilities and then doing those activities in those specific locations? That is another reason why what we are witnessing is an asset augmenting internationalization. So what is being done at the host economy in that sense get contributed, it gets complemented, it gets further enhanced by the activities of the of the multinational enterprises which now undertake this kind of an activities in other economies. Moreover, there is also a growing pressure from host government on multinational enterprises, which in fact had led them to have an increase in the access to use of local resources as a key condition to gain access to the foreign markets. So in the same vein, the discussion has also pointed out, particularly coming from the work of Christian and Philip et al., where they highlighted that the activities which is now being done by the multinational enterprises, they can have linkages with the scientific community in the host economy. In order to understand that, what they have done is divided the technology exploring activities of the multinational into three major parts: technology creating, technology exploiting, and technology seeking. When we talk about technology exploiting, the answer is very clear. There, what we have is something like a home exploiting or a asset exploiting situation where the product has been developed by the parent organization or the research and development which is conducted by the main headquarters of the particular company or wherever the focus is. Now, having developed that particular product, the idea is merely to use other markets. If certain amount of adaptation may be needed, that can be done. The next level is a technology seeking. Here you can think from a point of view of a car maker. Now suppose they have developed they are working on a new model of a car and they are looking for maybe some specific software that needs to be written which would be embedded in the particular vehicle. There is a possibility that they may rather have their work being done from an IT team which is located in their Indian subsidiary. So there the focus is to seek for certain specific skill which is now coming from maybe a country. Similarly, if they are focusing on some new development of a new chip, etc., they may focus on their Taiwan unit or they may get into a kind of a contract R&D with certain unit there. So here the activity is technology seeking. The company is very sure of that which particular aspect they are focusing on and accordingly they will look into the specific features of that particular host economy and try to seek it, try to get it for a product in that case which will be in a completely something which is now created globally. The another one is technology creating. Here, the focus is that the multinational enterprises research center may indeed have certain ideas. Those ideas are also generated in the particular host country. So from the idea generation to the prototype building and also finalization of the product, majority of the activities related to innovation are being conducted in the host economy. That is where we are talking about technology creating. So I hope it is very clear when we talk about technology exploiting, where you are looking for a product which is already existing and merely trying to adopt it into the other centers or other economies. Seeking, once again, the focus is very clear. The companies are seeking for some specific skill which they are very sure would be available in a particular host country. When we come to technology creating, that one can in fact see as a next step where the entire from ideation to the prototype or to the product building, most of the or majority of the activities are indeed located in a particular host country as such. Now this can also be seen as a composition of the R&D activities. For example, we have seen earlier case where we talk about starting with the distribution, then doing a foreign direct investment, and then doing some kind of a R&D activity. Now within the R&D activity, the company may indeed start with exploitation, may look for certain specific features over a period of a time. The R&D center may indeed become more comfortable, may become more confident, and will have more linkages with the local system, and as a result may grow up to something which is now capable of creating something on its own. So then now look at the different factors which contribute towards the decision of the firm to undertake research and development activity in the other country, or to undertake foreign investments in order to conduct this research in the other geographies. So first is clearly from a demand side, there is a need for a particular company to be close to the local customer, where you want to understand their requirements. For example, when you want to develop a portable ECG, clearly you know that for a very vast country, there are locations which are way beyond, or which are located in areas which are not very easily accessible. So to develop a very heavy machine which would be located in a location will not actually serve the purpose. So identifying this kind of a requirements, coming up with the product which would be dealing the specific needs. Of course, need to adapt the product to the local market conditions is another important factor. In terms of supply side, what we find, the linkages that a particular company may have with the locals is something of much relevance. Now these locals will indeed include the skilled scientific personnel, the renowned university or the private lab, proximity to the potential partners, maybe a low cost supply of R&D personnel. Some economies may offer them well highly skilled engineer at a very low cost as compared to their own economy, and local technological opportunities and constraints also. Sometimes these constraints may actually help companies to come up with a solution, and as a result you will find that the new a dimension is being added to a particular product. Apart from that, when a company indeed decides to go for an international innovation activity, there are various challenges that it faces. For instance, first of all, there is going to be definitely a very high coordination and control cost. There are definitely costs which are involved in engaging with the local innovation system actors, and to establish those links, one will also require a long period of time. Not only that, once having established those links, it is also important that those links are rather being maintained and also kind of used for their overall contribution to the innovation activities. This kind of a linkages, coordination cost, in fact would require that the innovation activity should have reached a particular threshold level. Only then you will find that this particular activities will motivate the companies to go forward. Unless the activities have reached a particular threshold level, you will identify that these coordination and control costs are going to be rather high. The another important fear that companies may have is that the technology which they have can be rather leaked into the developing or the other economy. If that happens, clearly they may lose their edge or the niche for which they are being known. Now this fear of leakage of key technology can be very strongly related to the intellectual property regime of that particular country, not only related to the regime which exists on paper, but also in terms of what kind of an enforcement exists in the economy. Apart from that, there is a possibility that a company indeed has a very strong base in the home country, because of which it has got into an inertia and may not be interested in going forward with an international innovation activity as such. So these are the some of the factors which kind of withheld, which kind of pull back the motivation for some of these multinational enterprises to indeed expand their research activities beyond the national levels. One very important contribution, what very push factor indeed comes from the partnering with respect to the science and technology community that can happen in the host economy. Now here, international collaborations, one may think that it might be rather substitution, but that is not the case. Many a times these international innovation activities will indeed be complementary to the activities which is being done at the host country. Apart from that, there can be various non-tariff barriers, and as a result what you will find that it is much more easier to overcome them, provided you have this kind of an innovation activity being located in the host country. So once again, the role will not be of a substitution, but to overcome those non-tariff barriers, it will be supporting the innovation activity. But all these factors will definitely depend upon what is the technological characteristics of the industry. Again and again, whenever we have been talking about the role of innovation, the role of patents, the role of university collaboration, we have again and again highlighted that these kind of aspects will vary from the industry to industry. We cannot have the same characteristics of the technological characteristics of the industries, and as a result, the implications of the linkages with the IPR institutions or that of the university, and in this particular case, the need for having an international innovation activity will once again vary as such.